Hi, this is Timmy here with Fashion Girls for Humanity, and today we're going to be making an N95 mask cover. So the first thing we're going to do here is cut out our patterns. So we have our pattern here, and then this is the fabric that we're going to be using. I'm actually using a lot of scraps right now, which is why all of my shapes and fabric pieces are very irregular, but just make sure you have enough fabric to place the piece. So this will be placed on a fold, you'll see here. So we're going to take this fabric, place it on the fold, and we're going to pin around the edge, and then we're going to cut out our pieces. We're actually also going to then notch, so just cut like a little slit once we've cut out our pieces, and we're going to do this for the main fabric and the lining fabric. So in order to notch, we're going to take the fabric here and just do a little bitty slit, and we're going to do it on all the little triangle parts. We now have our pieces cut out, and I just like to put a little mark where the notches are just so that you can see it later on. So you'll see I cut my slits here, and I'm just going to place a little mark on all those little points. It'll come in handy later, I promise. And we're going to do the same thing on the main fabric. It's time to combine our lining and our main pieces. So we're going to take the main piece, we're going to flip it over so you have it on the wrong side. And then you'll take your lining piece. This side would be the correct side. This is the side that's going to face your mouth. We're going to lay them on top of each other. We're then going to pin around the edge and sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now we're just working on stitching that 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around the edge of your mask. To use my foot for the angles. So now it's time to create the pleats on our mask cover. So remember the little notches that we marked on the edges where the little triangles were? So we're going to use those to make our pleats. So you see you have 3 sets of notches here. We're going to start at the top. So we're going to take the lower marking of the top set. We're going to pull it and make them match here, and we're going to pin that down, and we're going to do that on this entire side. So pull it up, match, and then pin, pull it up, match, and then pin. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side. So bottom one, pulling it up, match, pin, pull it up, match, pin, and then the last one here, pull it up, match, and pin. So it's going to look something like that. Then we are going to iron down our pleats. So right now it might be a little bubbled or a little flat. So you're going to basically pull tightly and create that little pleat in the center of your pins. We're going to take our iron and kind of press the pleat down. There. Take the next one and do the same thing. Last one. Put a little steam on it, kind of keeps them in there. So now your mask should look like this. So now that we have our mask pleated, you can see that this is the lining portion of the mask, and we have the outer portion. So now that we have this pleated, we want to mark our darts so that we can add the shaping for our nose and chin. So first things first, we're gonna fold this in half, showing the lining side. We're gonna release the darts, or the pleats here, so that it's flat. We're gonna take our pattern, and what we're trying to do here is we want to transfer this line and this line on the pattern onto our mask. So we're gonna place the pattern onto the mask. We're gonna fold back where that line is, here and here, and we're just gonna trace onto our mask. So I'll show you here. I'm gonna place it down, make sure you're on the folded edge, and then pin that, or like dog ear back that little dart piece so that you have something that looks like this. We're gonna do that on both edges. So we should have something that looks like this. So now we're gonna take our sewing machine and just stitch over that edge there and there, and that'll create some shaping for our nose and chin so that it's more comfortable. Now we have our darts sewn, as you can see, and now when you release your mask, you can see that you have proper shaping for your nose and for your chin. So now what we're gonna do is prepare to, I'm gonna prepare to add our straps and binding edges now. So the last thing we need to do with this piece, for the time being, is trim the edges. So right now we have a half-inch allowance around the outer edge. We want a 1/4 inch because our binding is gonna encase that edge. So we want it to be more narrow. So just take your scissors, or if you have pinking shears, that helps to stop fraying. We're going to trim all of the edges to be 1/4 inch. Do that now. Just be careful not to cut through your seams. Almost done. So you can now see that my edges, my seam allowance is much smaller than it was before. And the last thing we're gonna cut is our dart. So you can cut this edge if you'd like, but just remember that when you do, you're going to be breaking that seam that's there, so then you'll just want to re-stitch it. If you want to keep that dart, you can. You'll just, when we sew the binding, you'll just have to make sure to, you know, push it to one side. The only thing about that is it will make your binding a little thicker around this area and this area. So we're going to cut it for now. Snip, snip. And then, because I did cut those seams now, I'm just going to do one more straight stitch along the edge just to make sure that it's secure and stable. And then we will be setting this to the side and preparing our binding straps. So now we're going to finish our mask cover by applying the binding on the outer edges and also applying the straps. So to make those, we're going to use binding. You can order or buy your own binding. It's like pre-made in these little strips, and it'll have, it's basically 3 folds, and those 3 folds create this little binding that's basically gonna, you know, wrap around the edge of our mask and make it look clean finished and neat. So you can buy this pre-made, or you can make your own. So I only have this much binding, pre-made binding left, so I'll use it for the outer edges, I think. And then for the straps, we're gonna make our own binding. So what I'm doing is taking a fabric, cotton fabric, that has a straight edge on the, show you the edge is straight. And then I have a ruler here. So I'm gonna line up the ruler to create 1.5 inch strips. And I'm gonna take my ruler, take a pencil or something to mark, and just mark the lines, 1.5, all the way along the edge. And I'm gonna make, because our, I guess it depends on how long your fabric is, because I'm making this out of scraps, my fabric is kind of short. So I'm gonna cut 4 strips. And then we'll cut them out and join them together. It's my 4 strips. And then I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut them out. Two more strips. So I have 4 strips here, and we are going to now iron them and make binding. All right, so here's how we make our binding. The first thing I did was I took 2 of those strips that I had made, and I just sewed them together so that I can make a super long strip, just because this is going to be wrapping around our heads. So I sewed that together, and I'm just going to press that closed so it doesn't get in my way later. Now we're going to go to one edge of our 1.5 inch strips, and basically what we're going to do is create 1 fold this way and 1 fold that way. I usually leave like 1/8 of an inch in the middle just so that you have some like open space, because that's where your fold is. So you're going to place it like that, and I give 1 good ironing here just to like set it in. So now you see it's kind of pressed, and as we go along the edge, along the strip, we're going to keep folding and pressing. folding and pressing. And if it is a little too difficult to do both sides at once, you can also just do one side at a time. I'll show you how to do that. I'm gonna finish this one. Fold and iron. And as you go, the fabric will kind of start folding for you, just because now it's kind of, one side has been made already to be folded and the other side kind of wants to mimic it. So it should become easier as you go. Alright, so there's one strip. And now I'm just going to show you how to do one side at a time. So again, take one fold and you just do that side first. And then you can go along the entire edge and then come back and do this other side. And you should end up having a strip that looks something like this. So the last step to make your binding is to then do the final fold. So basically you've already, created your strip like this. So you're gonna fold one more time and iron. Now you will have your binding that looks just like the pre-made. Your iron is definitely your best friend here. It's gonna help you lock in that fold, and it'll help sewing the binding on become much easier. So definitely make sure you iron as best as you can and get some steam in there if you can, and you'll end up with this. Now we're going to prepare our binding for sewing. So I'm going to show you two different ways. I'm going to show you how to stitch on your pre-made binding. I'm also going to show you how to stitch on just like a plain piece of the strip before it's folded and create the binding that way. So if we're going to use the flat strip, what we're going to do is line it up to the edge. We're going to pin, and then we're going to stitch a line right there. So now that we've sewn the 1/4 inch along the edge here, we want to fold this back and iron. Steamy there. Now that we have that, we're then going to fold that one fold on the side. I'm going to fold that down. And then what we're going to do is then wrap it around the edge. And then apply some pins here. Then what you're going to do is sew along the edge as close to you can along this inside edge. So now I'm going to show you how to apply the binding that's pre-made. You'll see I have little stitches in here already. That's because I already sewed this on and did this video, and I didn't have any thread in my bobbin, so I'm gonna do it one more time. So basically, I'm gonna take my pre-made binding, I'm gonna unfold it. I'm gonna take my piece that I want to sandwich in between, and I'm gonna put it inside and fold that over. So I'm gonna make sure that the entire side piece is sandwiched in between the binding edges. And then again, I'm gonna sew close to the edge on the binding, and because it's perfectly symmetrical, it's gonna stitch the other side down at the same time. So there you go. So now that we have our edges sewn on, we're going to apply the straps. So we have I have the pre-made binding that we just made before, and I'm gonna do the same thing that we did earlier, but the one thing that you need to remember to do is find the center of your strip. So you're gonna fold the strip in half, and you'll see the middle point here, and you're just gonna mark it, because that's the section that you're then, ooh, I forgot. Let's cut the edges off of that side binding that you made. All right. So then we're gonna find our center. We're gonna meet it up with the dart that we made, one of the darts that we made. Push one of the darts to one side. And then again, like we just did for the side binding, you're gonna encase that. And I'm just gonna pin it all the way along the edge and top stitch it on. All right, get to sewing. So now that we've sewn our straps on, we have our mask. And you'll just tie it in the back, and there you go.